What's up, ladies and gentlemen, internet beings, and awesome people all around the world? This is your creative session for the day, Mr. Benja's ADD Experience Live. Special week. We're doing all BenjaCon. That's a celebration of all the times I used to get together at Comic-Con, E3, PAX, etc., and talk to some very awesome creatives and different types of people in the creative community. And today we've got on Jeff Junio, aka Yellin' Jeff, aka the Diplomat, aka Sega's #1 rising star. That's who we have on today, and we're going to get him in here to talk a little bit about his experiences. And this guest is one of my favorites. We've known each other for quite a while now. I consider him a brother, definitely in development and definitely in life. So I'm glad to have him on. And be sure to, even after the live is over, be sure to ask your questions, post your comments and things in the space below. We want to get back with you, let you see what you're thinking, and we'll go from there. And boom, we even got Happy Accident in the house, Grateful Rare Unique in the house. This is a good thing. All right, let's see about getting my man in here so we don't have to worry about waiting or any of that previous stuff. Oh, you sideways, son.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, but you're like 90 degrees.
Oh, I am? Okay, let me fix that. Hold up.
Yeah.
There we go.
See, this is how we do in game development, ladies and gentlemen. We just make stuff happen.
You know how it is. Shit doesn't go the way it's supposed to, and then hey, we got to put a ticket in, but we didn't need a ticket, so it's all good.
I'll send the patch.
Right. How you doing, B?
My man, I am doing so good, my man. And I know you're always conscious of time, right? So I started like 2 minutes late. I was like, oh crap. I'm starting 2 minutes late with Jeff. I hate that. With you in particular, it got me upset because so I'm all off schedule right now. My clothes washer, the washing machine, there's a seal and it broke, so it started spilling water everywhere. And this was a couple days ago, right? But laundry had been piling up, so I'm in here washing clothes, separating out stuff, and I got clothes all over the place because I'm doing all of my washing at once. And I couldn't find my day one shirt, and I wanted to wear that especially with you today. So I got my day one shirt going on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
very cool.
Because you were here from day one, seeing all the beginnings of my madness back at 3DO, et cetera.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the only reason I am late is because of this shirt.
It's all good. I know, it's weird because I'm Filipino, so there's this thing called Filipino time.
Oh yeah,
and I try not to subscribe to that or to subscribe to it because hey, I don't want to propagate those types of ideas or whatever. But
yeah,
I totally get it. So it's all good. It's interesting. I was trying to think of what am I going to wear today too, right? I started thinking about shirts and shit. So,
yeah.
I don't know if you can see that there, right?
Oh, yeah, the JC, Johnny Cupcakes.
Yeah. And it's you got me back on this. You talk about day one, even pre-day one, right? You got me on Johnny Cupcakes and stuff like that. So I'm just hey, I'm just going to go ahead and represent. So it's all good.
All right, man. Thank you. Also, we have, as I said, everybody jumping in the chat. Ask your questions. We'll weave them into the conversation, and we'll keep doing this thing. Last year we did this over Facebook. We've done it in person. We've done it over podcast channels, but this year we're doing Instagram, and it seems like a much more social place. So, we got it's a different type of vibe, and I'm really liking it. So I'm glad you were able to come in and join on. And we got
Thank you for having me for the second annual. So it's all good.
Yes, yeah, second annual official.
Yes.
I don't know where the BenjaCon name came from. I was probably just being stupid at some point and started putting it out there like that. But yeah, second official. But this is something we've always done, the creative discussions.
Right. Yeah.
So are you missing con season now? I know it's we're doing the pandemic thing, and
bro,
I know the vibe, but
bro. I mean, am I missing the con? I mean, I am like freaking crazy. You know, when obviously everything went down, you know, with the pandemic and all that, it's like, you know, outside of like obviously seeing friends and family, like one of the first things I jumped to was just like, fuck, that means there's fucking gonna be no cons, you know? And I'm just like, that was like one of the first things that just jumped into my head. And then obviously, you know, that happened. And then, you know, early on, we're thinking, oh, you know, maybe by Cinco de Mayo, we'll be out of this. You know, this is last year, you know, and maybe we might be able to have the cons back on in time, but obviously that didn't happen. And then, of course, that persists until today, you know, so I'm kind of like, you know, and this Comic-Con at home stuff, nah, dog, I ain't having it. It's just not
yeah,
happening.
yeah, it's weird. I don't know if you're able to catch Nastio earlier in the week. He actually goes pretty hard for Comic-Con at home.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he's got the blue and yellow streamers and balloons.
Okay.
He takes out all his comics and sets them up in displays. So him and his family, and he brings other family members over because they're used to it being, you know, collaborative kind of come together experience.
Right.
And he's like, you know what? I'm not stopping that vibe. I'm going to do it at home. And apparently, the way Comic-Con was thinking about it was literally at home because there's a bunch of PDFs and things you can print out to where it's like, you know, Hall H or whatever. You can put that on like a certain room in your house, or you know, like Artist Alley. You can put that in like the garage and have kids out there drawing or whatever. So they had the whole idea for at home, not like I'm going to watch stuff from home, but they're like, no, you take Comic-Con to your home. So I don't know. I don't know how many people have actually done it that way, but it's pretty slick if you do that.
Right.
You know, so yeah, we'll see.
I mean, you know what? I mean, more power to him, you know, and for those that can jump into, you know, the spirit of it and still vibe with that, it's all good, you know, and I totally get that, you know. It's just for me, just like obviously, you know, you and I, you know, veterans of going to Comic-Con for over many years and stuff like that. And you know me, you know, it's like, I don't even so much go anymore for, you know, the games, not even really so much for the movies, you know, because I really don't really care to stand in line and do all that stuff, right?
Right.
You know, for me, it's like I'm a very social creature by habit, and I like going out, right? I like taking photos. I like kind of just being in the thick of, you know, the whole madness, you know, either on the floor or outside of the convention center, you know, and just taking those photos, right? You know, and just kind of capturing those kind of weird, you know, swirling of just, you know, energy and stuff that just kind of happens, the randomness that happens with that. So that's, for me, is one, that's probably the biggest thing that I really miss about going to Comic-Con.
Yes, you were really big with the photography. I don't know. I want to say that I had the biggest collection of video game cosplay out there. Because nobody was actually separating out video game cosplayers. They just saw somebody in a costume and they took a bunch of pictures. But you got connected in a different way with like the whole Fox thing and some other. So how did you actually hook up with the Fox thing, and what made you want to do like a whole photography thing with Comic-Con?
So obviously, when I first started going to Comic-Con, I was just a regular attendee, right? You know, I would stand in line, you know, watch the panels and stuff like that. And then obviously, this was, I want to say, around maybe just around the time of the first Spider-Man movie, right? You know, with Tobey Maguire. Right? So it was around that time. So things were just starting to kind of get popping, right? You know, and more of the more or less kind of mainstream type of folks were coming in. At that point, it was still more or less kind of like the real kind of comic heads, you know, more kind of, not to say like more geek, but, you know, it wasn't as the pop culture phenomenon that it ended up being, right? And so, I just started off as just a regular attendee, and then as time went on, obviously you see all the cosplay, and I don't even think if we really called it cosplay back in the day, right? You know, it was just like, oh, folks just dressing up however they wanted to, you know, whatever characters that they wanted to represent. So to kind of give you a sense of like, you know, the impact of what Comic-Con was, you know, all of a sudden this term cosplay just kind of came into being. And so it was one of those things where I just kind of just started taking photos, you know, because you know me, I think you and I kind of vibe on this.
Yeah.
We dig on people who dig on shit that they love. Right?
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean? And so for me, it's just picking up on that. And I'm just like, I got to take photos of this. Obviously, any celebrities or whatever, roaming to the floor and stuff like that, I would do that as well. But that's just kind of how it all started. And then one night, Jen and I, my wife and I, were watching a Fox affiliate down here in San Diego's Fox Channel 5, Fox 5. And they were doing a segment on Comic-Con like they do every year, right? Because it's the big thing right here in San Diego, right? It's one of the, it's bigger than the Chargers when they're here. It's bigger than the Padres, and all this other thing. It was one of those things that was just uniquely San Diego. And then they were like showing photos, and videos of like, stuff that's going on the floor, which stars or celebrities are going to be in attendance, and of course the cosplayers. And then there was a little blurb, after that segment saying like, hey, if you want to be a contributor or correspondent, contact us at, fox5sandiego.com, blah, blah, blah. Huh. So Jen says, hey, you like taking these photos. Why don't you contact them? And so I did. And, the rest was history. I ended up being, a regular correspondent for them every year since then. That was, probably like 10, 12 years, running. So yeah, it was just, that's how I stumbled into it. And then obviously then, I just start, taking photos. So that became a big part of, my experience for Comic-Con rather than just going as an attendee, capturing these moments.
Right. I think we had talked about, being creative and running into the different creative types. A lot of us were developers at the time anyway. So just running into our friends, we would always show each other, hey, this is that, and this is that. Mm-hmm. And because it was a con, I think we just started doing other interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I held the art show at the 10th Avenue Theater. You started doing the Fox 5 thing. Mm-hmm. And different people were just doing different things. And I remember your work in particular. I'm used to seeing landscapes and, structural items as photography, as subjects. But then all of a sudden I started seeing the other side of you, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is that whole creative vibe. It's just coming out. And that's what I was really taking from the con, just the ability to run into all these other people and create different things. So just to reiterate, that's my current impetus, just creativity and keeping things going. And then, the Comic-Con season happened, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep talking about creativity and getting that good creative energy out. So I am forever actually thankful to you. I want to go ahead and say that. Forever thankful to you for pushing forward in a subtle but definitely strong and never-ending way that got me thinking about, man, I need to do more and more stuff like this. So thank you, Jeff.
Well, it's interesting you put it that way, because I have to thank you, because, obviously when I got into photography, I did the typical stuff. I would go out, to like, the Borrego Desert, or I'd go to the beach, or go into downtown and then take landscapes, right, or just more kind of like more abstract type stuff. But that was always really kind of like my focus. But I think that was just more me kind of learning what my interests were, right? In terms of, photography, right? What images and what type of subject matter kind of spoke to me. And, it took me a while to kind of get there. And then once, we started getting into those, those other things with the con, you mentioned the art show that we did. I think for me, that's really where it gave me an idea and this sense of like, hey, I can it's done when I say it now and I verbalize it, but at that point in time, it was a door that was closed to me in my mind. I'm like, hey, you know what? I have interest in games. I have interest in movies, all these different things, and I have, me, I have an F ton of action figures, right? From all types of things, from video games to comics. I'm like, there's something here that I can do with these things, right? So that's when I started getting into macro photography, and I started doing subject matter with comics and video games. And so I think it was, you doing the shows, and then obviously including all of us, Marcellus, Raphael, run down the list, right? Getting us all involved in that. I think that was awesome. It was really cool. So, I have to thank you for that, right? Because then that just expanded my palette, as it were, right? Photographically speaking, in terms of photography.
Yeah. No, definitely expanding the palette. That's something that's extremely important. And I talk with Raph all the time. Iron sharpens iron, and I
Yeah.
think that's what we ended up doing,
Yeah.
intentionally or not. That's just what happened. Speaking of which, we have Eddie Eddie Fachinko. He's going to be on. He's going to be on later in the week. He was the guy who started the Foundry, which is the bar that you had your art up in. I don't know if you remember the photography deal we did at that bar with Aubrey.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I remember.
So we took some of the images that you had made. We had like one or two at the Comic-Con art show, and then somebody saw it, thought it was cool. It became a thing, and then Eddie was starting the Foundry, and he was like, "Hey, we're looking for somebody." And I was like, "Well, you remember that guy who did the photography? He's got enough pieces, and we can do the whole bar."
Right.
So he's going to be on later this week. We had Aubrey on earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
You're on right now, obviously. We have Raph is coming through, so he's going to be on here definitely. So the whole con vibe, I want to make sure I get these talks started with all the people who interacted with me during the cons. Speaking of, we have Sugar Gamer and Raph. I'm not gonna call Raph by his username like I do with most people. Jehudi-san, he's in here.
I'm afraid to try it because I'm just going to mangle it. So I never even try. I don't even attempt.
Exactly. Good having you on. And we have a seeing in here says, "Sup Kuya Jeff."
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
What's up, Sang? Yeah, he's. I work with Sang over at Jam City, and so yeah, I'm the oldest designer there, so I'm just the kuya to everybody. That always throws me off, especially you, Ben. You know this since our days at Rockstar. When you learned what that word was, and then I think I was walking down the hall one day towards the kitchen, and you just yelled it from the other end of the hall, and it just threw me off into this weird space that I don't think I ever recovered.
I first used it at Franco's wedding.
Okay.
We were when we were in Vegas. We were all hanging out and talking and whatever, and I was like feeling like I was part of the brotherhood. I was like, "Hey, family and everything," And you walked by, and I was like, "Yeah," and you're just like,
"What?"
Yeah. And you kind of brushed it off, So I sprinkled it in here and there, but yes, I remember definitely that one time you totally stopped and were like, "Wait, what's that about?" But yes,
right. Yeah.
You are big brother Jeff.
You would have been hearing a lot of that weekend because, like, even my brother's friends, will call me that as well. So it's just funny that you would have heard that, the entire weekend that we were together for that.
Yeah. So one thing I've always admired about you is you have a different style of creativity that I don't see from a lot of other people, and I don't know exactly how to explain it. But when we worked back at 3DO. You started on the Mosley team, I believe, well before I did. I was still doing something else, I believe. But we were working on Johnny Mosley Mad Tricks, and I remember talking with the designers, and most of them came from the art side or the programmer kind of side. That's how designers kind of usually shook out. But you had a different angle, and I remember your map. You kind of wrote out a map. Your map had a lot of images cut out and references, and things like that. And I was like, huh. The artist had these like, oh, I want these slopes and it's going to look, this way. And the programmers were like, okay, we're going to have a 50-meter, clearing space of this type and that. And I was like, okay, you had actual references that like connected with people, real places. And it was something a little more tangible.
Right.
And at first I remembered thinking, well, this isn't what designers do, just because I hadn't seen that many other designers, but I kept wondering about it. And I was like, you know what? That's really inventive and really effective. And I wonder if you've noticed the way that you design is different than a lot of other people.
It's weird. I don't know that it's necessarily different. And maybe part of it is that, it's just the way that my brain is wired. And so I don't even ascribe that to being something that designers do in general. But I think for me, that was just more out of a necessity, right? Because I'm not good at programming. I really suck at it. I tried to do at least like some simple scripting, and it would give me a headache. And I'm not artistic, in that I can draw, right? Or draw very well anyways. And so that was a way for me to kind of bridge the gap, right, where I can at least try to get some ideas across in my head, have a real good visualization, right? Obviously for those who don't know, Johnny Matrix, Mosley Matrix, it was a freestyle skiing game, right, in the vein of SSX. And so, you'd go through the tracks. And so we would have different locales, San Francisco or Las Vegas or Washington, D.C., whatever the case may be. And so it was a way for me to kind of speak to the landmarks. Obviously, you want to capture those, in the San Francisco as an example, right? So you start running down the usual suspects: Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, right? Lombard Street, cable cars. You just call forth all the different imagery. And it was just a real good way for me to just, really thematically kind of build that story as you're kind of going through. Mm-hmm. So we would start at the very top of Coit Hill, right? And so I'm sure you remember I had like a picture of the Coit Tower, at the very top of this, and the start of this course, and it would end at the Golden Gate Bridge. Yeah. And so it was just this kind of progression as I would go through. And like I said, it was really out of necessity because I couldn't draw. But I wanted to have a real strong visual sense of what this story is as you're progressing through this course. And so that's really where it started. And I still do that to this day. But, maybe not so much, doing the actual kind of like cutting out images or stuff like that. Now I'll just kind of write in stuff. Mm-hmm. Unless there's something very specific, to an interaction. I did that a little bit when we were at Rockstar, when I worked on Midnight Club. I would need those reference points, right? And I would just kind of call it out because like, oh, okay, there's this entrance here. I needed to remember that. So it was very specific to a design or an idea that I had, for that particular landmark, in that game. So I can't say that that's something that all designers do. I know that's something that resonates with me, and it was really out of necessity that I developed that process.
Oh, I think that's one of the strongest, creative forces when, you have a necessity or you want to get something done. Right. Your energy is going in one direction and there's not a clear outlet for that energy. You've got to make something happen. And I think you've done that in a way that's very important to not only game development, but proper design of anything. And by design, I mean creating something in a way that humans can interact with it more easily or more effectively. So, and I say that because you introduced the idea of a story, a series of events, a series of actions, but this beginning and kind of end that a lot of designers don't have. They're just like, hey, I want to see this cool thing, or, there's this certain function or whatever. Or they're completely in the story realm and they just start sitting down making a script. And it's like, that's not necessarily what games are. And I think you tapped into that. And actually a little bit on your history now, because I'm going to kind of move this into something else, but a little on your history. You started with film. What was the exact study that you did?
So way back when I had studied over at the Art Institute of Seattle, and this was like back in the early 90s. And I actually had gone in for what they call the music video business. And so it was basically the idea that, we were exploring avenues and jobs in the music, in any field that had anything to do with music or videos, right? At the time, videos. And so I actually went in with designs on being a sound engineer. That was actually what I had wanted to do. And I realized pretty early on, because, we would have sessions in the sound booth, behind the giant mixing board. all the equipment and all that stuff, right? We would learn about all these things, and I just realized very early on that I didn't have an ear, for being a sound engineer. Before that, my background was I was a DJ. I was a DJ in high school, mobile DJ.
Hey,
So that's where that
I know you as DJ Flipsider, so that's all I'm saying.
right. But yeah, back then in the day, actually, I was DJ Renegade. So that was my original name when I first started. And so, so I went to Seattle for music video business, courses and degree. And I pivoted off of that once I realized that, I just didn't have an ear for being a sound designer. And that's how I got into video production. So I ended up, actually loving that medium, and then actually kind of getting into it, working with the cameras, and then also editing, doing the editing bit. That's actually where I find the most passion in terms of video production.
Right. I think I knew that earlier, but it didn't connect with me, I think, until I remember we were I was chopping up some video for something,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we crossed paths on Sony Vegas or something, just
Right.
in our discussions. And it was like, oh, I got this thing, and you were like, oh, you should try this thing, and it's got this and this, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to get a little of the other layer of Jeff and understanding this diplomatic storytelling, creative energy that makes up what you do. So no, I totally remember that. And real quick, we got a J Kingpin in the house, John Diaz.
Yes.
Yeah, and he wants to know what triggered the name change.
Oh, okay. So how did I go from DJ Renegade to the Flipsider? So interesting story. Obviously, like I said, I was a mobile DJ back in the day when I was in high school, and ended up doing a trip out to the Philippines with my family. And we were there, when you go to the Philippines, you just don't go for like, a week, whatever. You're there for a good while, right? So I want to say we were there for maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks. So we were there for a long while. So obviously there with my family, I have a big family, I'm Filipino. My mom is like one of, 11 children. My pops, is one of 10. So we have, a lot of relatives, a lot of aunties and uncles and a lot of cousins. And I just remember coming back. Not to say that I wasn't ever really in touch with my, with my heritage or anything like that, but not to that degree. And I came back from the Philippines with a real kind of appreciation, for family and my heritage and for my homeland. And so it was one of those things where, as I got back, I started thinking about, well, how can I start to, not so much promote, but at least kind of like represent that heritage and that pride in that heritage and in being Filipino. And so that's where I actually, ended up making the switch. And I'm like, you know what, I need to do that. And at the time, being a DJ was one of the biggest things in my life, and that really resonated with me. So I ended up, going from DJ Renegade to I was actually DJ Flipside. So that was actually my second name was DJ Flipside. Obviously this is pre-internet. This is pre, getting websites or pre-emails and stuff like that.
You don't have no SoundCloud?
I didn't have, this is what, I want to say 95, 94. So no, I don't even think that was even like, a wet dream for whomever the inventors were actually, created it. But once all that happened, and the whole .com and all that other stuff, I didn't have the foresight to grab the screen, the URL, to register DJ Flipside. And so I think you and I had this discussion, right, before. And then we were trying to kind of come up with names. And then it was you who came up with the Flipside. That's how I actually ended up landing on that. And it was partly, again, out of necessity. It's like, well, I did search and somebody else had DJ Flipside. And I'm like, God damn it. And I know I was the first. I know in the history of the actual name, I was the first DJ Flipsider.
Yeah, but the other imposters can go. Yeah.
Right? So there's no way I can prove that. So I'm like, all right, well, let me figure out a new name. And then thanks to you, we landed on the Flipsider. So that's where that landed. That's how I landed here with the Flipsider. Yeah, and also no DJ, right? So I
Right,
obviously
right.
wanted to start kind of like, kind of breaking out of that.
Yeah, I think I was in my well, I was just starting to get into branding and marketing.
Right.
I had been hanging out with the people at 3DO on the middle floor who were doing the branding and marketing, Adrian, and those people over there. So I was like, oh, this whole branding thing, this idea of this, and
Mhm.
what is this? And um, what's his name? Shepard Fairey, and I'm seeing the pieces in the background. You know, so that whole branding thing was hitting me from all different directions, and I think we just naturally fell into those conversations. So yeah, that was a fun time. Now, how
I
did you
appreciate
go?
it. Thank you for that.
How did you? One other thing I've noticed about your development is, and I definitely don't mean this as a knock, but you've got this consistency where you seem to be more of a, hey, let's bang this out, let's knock this out, and da da da. And you don't have these incredibly high, oh my God, kaboom moments, or these low periods of just no creativity. I've always seen you as someone who's able to just kind of, keep that steady boom, boom, boom progress and building. How do you maintain that? Or is it even something you think about?
It's interesting that you say that because I think in the last couple of years, certainly in the last year, prior to the pandemic, I was actually in a little bit of a creative rut, and I wasn't necessarily producing or putting out as, many things as I could have, either if it was music or definitely on the photography side.
But you said just before the pandemic?
Just before the
Or, okay.
Yeah. And then obviously, being home, and not being able to go out and having more opportunities, to work on things, because we are home, that basically kind of sparks some things, right? In terms of like me trying to get back into, being a little bit more creative. So I think a lot of it has to do where if there's a focus or something for me, that I can have a goal towards, right? Like, hey, we have a show, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something that I want to commemorate. If you remember when we did WonderCon, when we had the 666 booth, um,
Yes.
that was around the time that obviously there was that that we were focusing in on, and then that was the time that the first Godzilla movie came out, right? The not the bastardized one with Matthew Broderick, but obviously the ones that they just did the third movie in for Godzilla versus Kong. So that first movie was coming out that year, and that's when I started working on the Godzilla song, right? The category G Kaiju,
Yes, yes.
right? And so that's just another example of, yeah.
And my bad video editing.
No, that was great too. I loved it. It was when you did it, I'm like, oh, this is some shit that I never considered. And it gave it a whole new dimension for me. So I totally dug it. You brought in like some of the gaming elements. So I totally dug that. So it was all good. But yeah, it's I've always been driven by, any type of external goals, or some sort of a very defined, well-defined finish line, right? So like when we had the art shows, at Comic-Con, again, I have a finish line. There's a defined date, right? There's a time frame that I can shoot for. So I work very well with those where it's just like, okay, hey, I got a month or 2 weeks or whatever the case may be, right? This is the finish line. Let's get it, right? I'll start working towards that. Where I falter, and I know that this is a big weakness of mine, is when I'm creating for the sake of creating without necessarily having a end goal, right? And it's just something that's just I've tried to do it where it's just like, hey, you're working on something for the sake of working on it, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't. I don't quite stick the landing as consistently with that, and certainly in this last year, that's proven that out. Where it's just like I have. In the past, I can always kind of blame like, oh, I'm busy, I'm working, and I don't have enough time. But now it's just like we're home all the time, and I haven't been able to really, capitalize on this as much as I would like to. Which is why I think I got into the Yelling Jeff stuff, doing the movie reviews, because it's like, well, what am I doing? I'm watching movies. I'm going out to the movies. I'm watching television.
Yeah.
I like talking about movies. I like talking shit about movies. And that's kind of a low entry, a low I don't want to say low energy, but it's a low hanging fruit that I can kind of still maintain, you know, a little bit of, pop culture relevance in terms of finding out, you know, and following things, and then still being able to kind of contribute to that.
So, okay, we'll jump there because I was going to get there eventually. With this outlet, and as I said, you know, I think all creatives need a way to have their energy keep going without it getting blocked, without it getting subverted or drained away, whatever. I don't know if you remember, we talked about energy at one point, and I was sounding pretty woo-woo about energy and all this jazz. But I was looking at it from a very serious programmatic point of view, and it came down to creativity for me. And I don't think I didn't actually express that to you when I figured it out, but I was like, no, it's creativity. You get up, you've got to create a good day. You've got to create a good workflow. You've got to create a good meal. Whatever you're doing, you're creating something. So that's what I was trying to wrap the whole energy thing into.
Right.
So, you know, when you were talking about the pandemic and the movies, that definitely reminded me of that because, you know, you're doing this stuff anyway. And if the energy just comes in one way and it's just like, yeah, that was a great movie, well, that's fine. But then what do you do with that? You can put your spin on it and put it back out. So, you know, you move the creative energy forward, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It really does, for sure. You know, so, you know, it was just interesting as I started doing that. It's just like, well, you know, I'm watching these movies and I'm doing these reviews. And then it's just like, then, you know, for me, and you know how I am, right? You know, it's like sometimes I like to be a little extra. And I, you know, it's like try to kind of put a little bit more of a Jeff spin on it. What can I do, you know, to just, you know, kind of at least somehow distinguish myself from just regular old, like, oh, hey, you know, 10 stars, you know, 5 stars, four stars out of 5, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of stupid. I don't know how, I can't even really remember how I landed on it. But it was just like, I had this picture of myself yelling, right? You know, and I had kind of been messing around with that. And I'm like, you know what? This looks like a yelling Jeff, you know. I was kind of messing around with different names, and I'm going to use this in my review. Does it make fucking sense? No.
Yeah.
But people remembered it. It was freaking weird and it was crazy.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, people gravitated towards it and they started latching onto it. You know, and you know that they pick up on it when they start calling it other things that I never called it, right? You know, because people will call it Screaming Jeff. And I'm like, well, Screaming Jeff kind of sounds like something else. So, you know, but hey, cool, you got it. You understood. You know,
hey, aren't you the guy from Holler and Junio?
Right.
That's awesome. So are you more of like, do you consider yourself a reviewer, a critic, a fan? Or what? You said review, but what does that mean to you?
Reviewer. So, you know what? I guess yes, all of the above. You know, obviously I'm a fan of the movies, right? You know, otherwise I wouldn't, you know, be doing them. And I like kind of at least sharing my thoughts with them. Not necessarily, you know, just say, hey, you know, I agree with you, you know. And in fact, sometimes I like it when people, you know, say, well, you know, I see where you're coming from, but I disagree, you know, and that's perfectly fine. I'm cool with that. But you know, I don't know. Critic sounds almost really super, you know, official. Mm-hmm. So you know, I don't know. Maybe you know, reviewer is a better term, but I tend to think like I don't like to parse them out like, you know, I'm exclusively just one thing. So, right. You know, I'm probably a little bit of everything, you know, up there, and it really depends on maybe the movie. Maybe if it's a movie that's just purely kind of, you know, popcorn fun, you know, like I watched Fast 9 recently, mm-hmm. I'm not going to be going into that, you know, with a super critical eye. I'm more likely going to be just a fan, you know. If I'm going to go into something like, you know, something that's more like, I don't know, Godfather-ish or something along those lines, I'll probably be a little bit more of a critic, you know, maybe start calling some things out. And then obviously just kind of peppering shades of each of those in there depending on, you know, where I'm vibing at that moment in time.
Yeah. And people in the comments seem to like yelling Jeff, so we got to bring it back.
Yeah, you know, it was funny is I had taken a hiatus right before the pandemic, and then I was going to come back, and you might even see it like in my Instagram. I had made an announcement, hey, I'm coming back.
Yep.
I did like a splash page and all these other things, and then we just went on lock. And then it was just like, well, I guess not. And then I've heard from other folks, it's like, well, you could have still done, like, movies, on Netflix and, Amazon and those other things. But I don't know, part of it for me is just like, I like going out to the theaters. I really enjoyed the theater going experience. And it's a different beast when you start talking about like stuff at home.
So our theaters did to you?
I'm sorry?
Our theaters did to you.
So I actually went back to the theaters to watch the last 3 movies I saw recently. I was in the theater, so I went to go watch Quiet Place 2,
okay,
and then Fast 9, and then Black Widow. And so I would like to say that theaters are not dead. I don't know that they are or not at this point in time, especially, with everything that's still going on, now with these variants, with COVID, who knows, I hope it isn't. If I have anything to say about it, it won't be, I'll still be going when I can, and obviously, as safely and as responsibly as I can.
Yeah. Man, I tried to get up and go see Black Widow, and I was like, well, maybe I should just test out the premiere access to see what it's like. And that was my excuse for sitting at home, So
I
was like, $30. I could have been in the theater sitting somewhere for, there's a little cheap theater that I go to up the street that's like $6. So I usually do that on like Tuesdays or whatever, unless I need to see it on a real screen.
Right.
But shout out to Nader, Zeroed in Printing, Trailer Treasure Boys. Thanks for joining in. We got Jeff Junio, Yellen Jeff, designer, game designer, videographer, photographer, awesome mind,
a little bit of everything.
hat aficionado, runner, just all that. Benja got, and they had matinee shows nearby. Yeah. There were definitely matinee shows. That was the $6 thing I was telling you about. I usually just pop in, watch the movie, and there's a Trader Joe's next to the little theater, so that's why I do that. And I'm like, all right, fair enough. But Hooters.
What?
Can't think if there's a Hooters near any theaters I know of, but that could be a thing as well. Just depends. Check this. You know that I was wondering why I was relating to your running story when you told me. And it came back to me recently. Because for those of you who don't know, Jeff does a running thing. He started running a little while ago and it became a thing. And I always use the idea of a runner's high, like when you're really getting into your work or your workout, your programming, you get in a certain zone, and the runner's high is that's the classic kind of definition of getting in that zone, right?
Right.
I realized that I did that as well when it was in the 90s. I started rollerblading. Okay. And I spent a summer in Minneapolis, right? And I knew a guy, and he was rollerblading. He's like, yeah, well, if you want to come out, me and this guy, that guy does roller hockey. I like doing tricks, and this guy just, flies around the campus. It was a summer program at the University of Minnesota. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Let me get some rollerblades and try this thing out. And I started rollerblading, and it became a thing where I would rollerblade, go down these hills, around the way, cut around the main part of the campus, and it became like this big routine, right? And with rollerblading, and it's kind of like running in a way, but I noticed that you start on this journey and you kind of can't stop. I mean, you can stop and rest, you can breathe or whatever. But if you turn around and go back, that's just kind of this weird defeat. So you have to go the entire, or at least part of the way, and make a circuit, right? When you're running,
right.
Or when you're doing any type of thing where you need to complete a circuit. But once you start, you kind of have to go. You get in this zone, the runner's high, and you finish it and complete it. I actually started relating this in the past several years to starting into a project. I'll start on something. I start basically running through the process where, it's like, hey, let's start this game up. Let's start this project. Let's start doing these Instagram lives or whatever, and it becomes a thing where I'm in the zone and I'm running. Now, what's interesting is that I needed that physical action to kind of make that make sense for the other side of it. And with you doing the running, has the physical challenge changed how you think about or relate to starting up something and keeping it going? And what does that running give you, I guess?
It's interesting when you mention that, right? So obviously with the runner's high, you're reaching this kind of state where, a certain amount of miles into it, you kind of just reach this almost kind of a weird state of euphoria, right? Where everything kind of falls away, right? You're just in the zone, as you said, you're running. You're not necessarily mindful of your breathing. You're not necessarily mindful of the fact that your calves, your legs, your feet are sore, right? You just kind of get to that place where it's just like, it feels almost kind of effortless, right? And you're not really mindful of it. And it doesn't last a long time, but once you kind of get there, it's just kind of, it's out of this world in some cases, right? When you experience it. And so it's really interesting because it's not an experience that I've actually had very often. And so I think to liken it to what you're talking about, right, is this idea that you want to get into that zone. And what I found was that the correlation is I have to get my body moving. I'm not one of these types that can just, instantly kind of turn it on, like that little mental switch or that flicker that happens in the head where I can just kind of just turn it on. And a lot of times I'll end up having to at least kind of get the juices flowing, start moving around. Maybe even do, like, you and I've been, we roll way back, from even, I'm going to recall our salsa days, right? When we used to go salsa dancing, where I'm like, just, just kind of getting that rhythm going, right? Because you start kind of getting your body and you hit a certain cadence and they just kind of align. And it's just something about that for me that's always kind of clicked. And so I always tend to want to, at least try to find, a physical aspect or a physical element, in which for me to kind of put my energies into. I'm not talking about like, running a half marathon, but, at least like in the same way of getting the, those juices flowing. Because this whole body is just one big giant organ, right? And one part, by itself isn't necessarily going to work. You need the whole body to kind of get the blood flowing, and start kind of getting that up here, right? So I've always found that that's been helpful for me. Like whenever I feel like I'm in a rut, why is it you think, when you're after lunchtime, food is sitting in your gut, you haven't moved, right? And you start feeling sleepy, you start feeling sluggish. I got to get up, I got to move. Right. And I'm always constantly moving, so it's that old adage, you keep moving or, you die, that type of thing, so I've always found, at least for me, that's always been a very strong correlation. Of course, everyone's mileage will vary, so that's not necessarily true for everybody, but I found that works for me.
That's awesome. Shout out to Deluxe. We got somebody named Deluxe in here. Do you know a Deluxe? Deluxe 3? It's Deluxe, son.
Oh man, it's Deluxe, son. That's so good.
Oh yeah. Oh, speaking of movies and Deluxe, oh my God, it's amazing. That's an old reference, by the way.
Hold on, sorry. For whatever reason, my there you go. Sorry.
Got computers talking to you?
Yeah, my Echo all of a sudden thought I called her name and I did not.
Yeah, we got.
What's up, Deluxe 3? Deluxe 247 here, baby.
That's right, baby. It's Deluxe, son. Real theater movie heads will remember that one.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to Anthony 17, McCooley Cool, Josh Moreno Design, Mr. Sean Deluxe. Glad to have you all here. And check this out. So yeah, it seems like everybody's got a little bit of a physical kind of relationship with their mental or creative work. Yeah, if you have any other examples, throw them in the comments. I'd like to hear about that. What I used to do, you were talking about that after lunch kind of lull.
Mm-hmm.
I would use that period to just walk around the offices and talk to people, find out what they were up to. And I found that after lunchtime, people really didn't want to get back to work anyway. So they'd see me coming by or whatever, and like, oh, thank God, I was falling asleep. I can talk to somebody now.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of worked, going around talking to everybody at that time. So yeah, that's definitely. And we did when we were in the old Angel Studios building. I remember we actually damn near scheduled walks. It was such a process. Me, you, AJ, whoever, would go in and out on these walks. And, it's weird how, like you said, it's one big organ, that whole physical, mental, spiritual, social vibe all
Mm-hmm.
works together, to get you whatever creative energy you have. So now that you started running, and, we've covered that story before, so we don't have to do that again. But it's a pretty good story about how Jeff got into running. I'll post the link to the other video later. But since you got into running, has your development changed at all, or do you think it has?
In terms of like what, like my creativity, development
I don't.
process.
Yeah, I don't know your processes, the way you look at things. Yeah.
I don't know that it necessarily has. I think I've always kind of used it as a way to kind of maintain. Obviously I'm older, so I want to make sure that whatever I've got now doesn't get more effed up, as time goes along. So there's that. But what I do find is it has given me more energy throughout the day, to be able to kind of just cope with things. And in a really weird way, sometimes when I run up against like, a challenge, at work or even at home in my personal life, or I feel like I'm in a rut, I always kind of have that to kind of fall back on. Not so much like say I'm going to go running at this moment in time, but like I always equate it to the fact that, hey, for a guy who hasn't ran for a long time and outright loathe running, I think I've done pretty good, and then being able to run, a half marathon. And I always kind of fall back to that as like, especially when I feel like I'm starting to kind of slack, where I'm just like, hey, slacker, hey, asshole, you've done harder things. You know what I mean? This is nothing compared to, what you've done. And so I always use that as a sort of a weird motivator for me as well, right? Where I'm just like, yeah, you know what? It's in the mind, right? And really when you're running, once you kind of get past the physical part of it, right? You've got your wind, you're built up, you've done your training. It really becomes a matter of mind over matter, right? It's all mental. And so that's where I always kind of use it more so than anything else outside of just the obvious benefits, physically speaking and health wise. But I also use that as sort of like a weird kind of motivator as well. I find myself that my days sometimes I flow from being motivated to not being motivated, right? And I have to try to, and it's hard to be on all the time. And I'm not even suggesting that you be on all the time, but it's about recognizing when you're not on, and then trying to course correct, and maybe it's just as simple as just getting up, and walking around, or I listen to music, that's another thing too, for me, it's just like, it helps to kind of like at least get my mind in that mental frame. And then when I hear music, especially if there's something that's popping that I really like, I'll get up and I'll just kind of shake it a little bit, maybe put on the salsa song and just do a couple of steps, and then get back at it, so that's where I found, at least with the running, to kind of go back to your question, it's helped me, right? I use it as a motivator. It's just like, well, you've ran half marathons, and I even ran one where I got like what do you call it? A strain in my quads as I was about halfway through, and I just had to power through it. I had to walk, for a little bit until it subsided. But I finished it, and I always use those as motivation. Particularly when when I'm starting to feel like I'm feeling flat.
Wait, use the remembrance of the time that you powered through. Okay, yeah.
Yep. It's just a recall, like, dude, yeah, it's not great now. You're not feeling, 100%, but you felt worse and you've completed your goals. No reason why you can't do that here.
Definitely. I think when things start to get in a rut for me, I just end up kind of doing some dumb shit. And I didn't know that this was a thing until I was at home one time, and I went in the kitchen and just started taking some stuff out. And my dad asked, I was like, "What are you doing? We already ate." And he's like, and then my cousin looks over. He's like, "Man, Benjamin doing some dumb shit again." And it was just like, wait, that's a thing? People know me for just doing random stuff or whatever. But that's generally what I do to kind of get out of a creative rut. And that's kind of how this whole Instagram Live thing happened. I don't know if you know, but Instagram wasn't my favorite social platform. I was just like, all right, people seem to be enjoying it, put pictures up, show and tell, whatever. But then at some point, I had done Theo got me on it. I had done the Facebook Lives and things like that. And then I was like, well, let's get on Instagram and do this little thing here and there. And Theo was like, well, you don't have to do it on Facebook. You can try Twitch or YouTube or whatever. Hell, Instagram. So we got on Instagram and started doing the lives. And I was like, you know what? I could just do this. And when sometimes, when I get into something, I just keep doing iterations and iterations. So I'm in for this IGTV thing about 50 episodes in right now. I have to count. I'm close to 50, I believe. But yeah, it's just become a thing. Didn't mean to become a videographer. It was just, let me start on some dumb shit. Oh, it's a thing now, and I keep going. So that's kind of my thing. Just jump in and try something new, see what it's about, roll on to the next thing.
Okay, well that's interesting because I totally picked up on that. It was just like all of a sudden, you having, very, I don't want to say minimal, but like obviously not as, into it as you are now. And then all of a sudden it went from that to, oh shit, then you're doing this thing almost basically daily. It seems like there's always something, new or something that you're doing every day. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So that's interesting to know. What was it for you? Was it the ease of the platform, anything in terms of their offerings versus others, because I think for me that's also something else that's always kind of a barrier for me, right? It's like I try to kind of clear the decks as much as I can when I want to be creative, but then I end up kind of using that as a crutch sometimes, right? Well, it's like, oh, well, it's not right, Wait,
what do you mean clear the decks when you want to get creative?
Like make sure that I'm not working on anything else, that I have all the things that I need, like any equipment, any setup. And I tend to use that as a crutch, like I said, right? So like if I'm doing music, right? I ended up getting a DJ controller. Well, I need a better laptop, right? I need these things, so it's always kind of like, I find that, if it requires a lot of forethought or a lot of planning on my part, more often than not, I probably won't follow through. And it's usually kind of the lower hanging fruit stuff, to borrow a term I used before. So I'm wondering, if that's what kind of worked for you, or is there just something endemic in this platform that worked best for you?
No, it's my curiosity about the energy of a medium. And I'm going back to this energy concept. And one day, as I said, I already grew the hair out. I'm going to get a robe and go up and live in the mountains one day. But the energy of a medium is actually a thing. There's the technology, there's the social aspect, there's the more spiritual aspect where it's like, this is part of Facebook, but it started out as a hipster community, whatever, and then there's the actual, like the physical, mental aspect where, no, you just turn it on, you kind of go, what are the mechanics of it? So there are those four basic aspects. And, when I got in, I just wanted to start moving my energy in some direction that hit on all those platforms. So Facebook, I had friends there. It was relatively easy, but there was a lot of little like, well, hey, make sure you set up your OBS and this, and make sure you're You know, it was widescreen, and that meant like I need to set up my lighting a little different. It was just a bunch of little stuff, right? And it wasn't bad, but it didn't feel right. Then, just doing straight videos, putting them out to YouTube or wherever, it was like I was trying to over plan a little too much. Like, okay, at 15 minutes in, I need to be talking about this. At, half hour in, I need to be transitioning over to this. So the planned video, which is fine, became one thing. And every platform had its own little thing. I don't know if you remember Pod Squadron, the Star Wars podcast. Mm-hmm. So I I co-founded Pod Squadron, which is a Star Wars podcast. And it's part of the Geekish Network now. I didn't want to necessarily be a part of a whole network. So I was like, you know what? I co-founded it. This is awesome. This is great. I'm going to leave it off to you guys. I'll support you wherever. So check out Pod Squadron, the Geekish Network, by the way. Anyway, they had a whole production thing going on, but this is me taking my energy and kind of spitting it out there in different directions and seeing where it tapped into a vein easily for me, So for whatever reason, when I did an Instagram live, the first one it was actually rotated 90 degrees too, by the way. So it was messed up, it was grainy, and I'm like, hi, I'm on here live. I don't know what the hell's going on, whatever. But even though nobody was on watching me, the live aspect kind of took me back to my Howard University Children's Theater days, right, which I don't think I've ever spoken about. I was one of the students at Howard University's Children's Theater, and they had this thing where they would put you on stage, and somebody would come up, hand you a little sheet of paper, and there'd be some prompts around, and you just basically kind of read the prompts. And once you read the prompts, or you and a couple others who may be with you, you just start kind of talking through an improv. So that whole thing, the whole live, where you can't just stop and say, I'm sorry, let me start over, or hold on, let me do whatever. You kind of have to keep going.
The show must go on, yeah.
Exactly. So that brought up vibes I've had from, like piano recitals, got to keep going. Children's theater improv, you got to keep making something up. And, talking at different events even brought me back to, those designer rooms at like Rockstar and 3DO, when they would, as a designer, they come in looking for answers. They're like, okay, we've got 3 weeks. We need to put together X, Y, and Z. Give me your answers and what you're thinking right now. Let me put together no. Just tell me what you're thinking right now. Yeah. So, and you just have to riff on it kind of live. I mean, you're not riffing, but you know what I mean. You're flowing. Yeah. So when I hit Instagram Live, I was like, wow, this platform and all of the aspects of it are just working on that free flowing tip. And I think that's what I needed to get more into. It was definitely a challenge, but now I'm going back and looking at people who've done lives and people who have, talked off the cuff basically for 3 and 4 hours on their podcast. And I'm like, you know what? I can kind of do that. I've seen Rachel Maddow do it, where she just talks and goes. I've seen, random internet clowns who, may not be saying anything good or solid, but have this ability to keep rolling together a story. So I was like, you know what? This is kind of where we are right now. Let me tap into that energy. So that's kind of how this happened, and it's working for me. And I've got a whole other plan for where I'm going to go with this, but yeah, it's working for me.
No, I can hear that, because sometimes you can be beholden, right, to the process, and, sometimes, particularly like if I want to try to be more grandiose, then that just means there's more, I'm increasing the scope, and that means sometimes production values need to be increased. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, it comes at the cost. And I know for me, and I think maybe Diaz also mentioned that as well, right? It's like you can really get caught up in that. almost to the point where it's just like it's almost maybe, you know, it's self-defeating, right? Where it's just like through best intentions, you know, at least I find for myself that I end up kind of sabotaging, you know, myself down the line, where I'm like, well, shit, that took a long time, you know, and then if it's, and particularly if it didn't hit like how I thought or how I wanted it to, then that becomes even more defeating, you know, at least for me, where I'm just like, well, shit, I put in all this time and energy and it didn't land the way I wanted it to, or it didn't come out the way I had hoped it would.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's just something to be said about, you know, just getting into it, right? You know, just making it happen. And, you know, like you mentioned, you know, the live aspect, I can totally relate to that, right? You know, I do a lot of presentations, and, you know, I talk a lot at work, you know, obviously on Zoom or, you know, Google Meets. But, you know, when you're up there, like you said, the show must go on. And if you flub, you know, there's no do-over, right? Right? You know, you mess something up, there's no do-over. And you just try to recover as best you can. Right?
Yeah.
You know? But there's an energy that's to be, you know, found in that as well, that I also like. I mean, I hate it, but like it at the same time. You know, so that's an interesting kind of cross section when you talk about almost kind of like a live performance. So I can totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. You know, and there's something, I don't know, there's something about it when somebody shows up and they're live, you're kind of like, hey, this is happening right now. And you're just kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen because it's live, so I should watch it like right now. And so there's that connection of it. And, you know, Instagram's got a lot of random people flowing in and out. So, you know, people like 1202 Salon and Spa, thank you for joining us. You know, Richard Curiel, Now Ready, Aim, Fire. You know, we got all the, you know, a lot of people just randomly coming through at different times, and you don't know who it's going to be. I've had family, friends, coworkers, you know, people I thought I'd never see again show up and just like, hey, and then kind of leave. And it's like, oh, wow, that's part of the energy now. So it's really interesting. One quick point that I want to jump on that you mentioned was, and I consider this a classification of having blocked energy. When you don't know, maybe you've started a little bit, but you're not really in any kind of flow yet. Where on one extreme, you know, you're not doing anything at all, and you're just kind of sitting there. You're opening the book, you're closing the book, you know, you're turning on the computer, then you're going to do something else. Where that one extreme where nothing is happening, and then the other extreme where you're doing, I don't want to say too much, but you're just running off without any planning. You're randomly throwing stuff out there, and you've got a lot of motion, but it's not like, you know, maybe you need to stop and get the software, get the tools, I guess what I'm getting at is like on one end, you're getting ready. You know, you're buying stuff, you're going through the tutorials, you're installing software, buying new computers, whatever. You're just getting ready, you know. And then on the other end, you've got this, you know, I'm just doing stuff, and you're not really producing what you can at its best level. So I don't know, where do you fall in terms of what's more of a problem for you, maybe, or how do you get through it?
I definitely fall into the I need to prep, and that's where I tend to I can falter, right? You know, where and a lot of it really just kind of depends on how prescient it is to me at that moment in time, right? You know, and again, if there is a goal line, right? You know, if there's a finish line, you know, that I'm striving for. I think those two factors, right, you know, will more than likely affect me in terms of, like, you know, if I'm going to quote unquote deliver, right? If I don't have that goal line, if I don't have a sense of, like, you know, what's this time frame or what's the end result, right? If it's pretty nebulous to me, I can find myself in, you know, preparation hell, you know, for a while, right? You know, where I'm just like, okay, well, I need this software, I need this, this laptop. I need this equipment, right? And that's what happened when I got like the DJ equipment, and when I ended up getting a new controller. Well, I'm like, I need a new laptop, because the laptop I have, which in fairness was not powerful enough, and it was getting into like some technical issues. It would stutter, it would pause. I was running out of space and stuff like that. So there were some legitimate reasons, but I spent a long time like looking at laptops, looking at the perfect laptop, Googling stupid shit. It's like, hey, what laptops can you use for this and that? And then I'm like, well, do I want it to just be for DJing, right? So then I started looking at like other music production software, Ableton Live. I started looking at all these other things.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see like it's just this like rabbit hole that just kind of keeps getting deeper and deeper, and that's just because I didn't have any real focus. I didn't have a deadline that I needed to work towards, and I know that for me that's what works. But then I finally realized like, hey, you know what, I got to a point where just like if I don't tamp down on this, then I'm just going to be in this preparation hell for for forever. And so I was able to finally at least kind of like recognize that, and I think that's just part of just being knowing myself as well as I do, that I had to actively kind of like put those restraints on myself. So I definitely kind of fall on that other end. The other part that you were talking about, where it's just like you're just kind of doing stuff, I wish I can do more of that, right? because at least it's momentum, right? I always talk about motion in the game. It's motion, it's activity, and I think it's that old story of I think you had told me about it before, where you're working with clay, and it's a class that is making pottery.
Yeah.
And there's the one student that is only worked on that one pottery for the entire semester, right? Versus the student or students that keep making new pottery every day, and then at the end of the semester, who came out with a better final product? And it was the student that kept working at it, right? Kept making new creations every day. Maybe not every day, but certainly wasn't stuck on the same one that they did when they started. So I wish I were that way. It's interesting, we talked about the Godzilla song, right? The category G Kaiju song. I started that back when we were at Rockstar.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, and it was these little things, because I found a riff that I liked, and then needed to find the beats. And then I had like a kind of a proof of concept, little 20, 30-second bit. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I sat on it, for the next 7-8 years, and finally, as proof of what I'm talking about, that movie came out, was getting ready to come out. And I'm like, okay, that's my finish line. Yeah. And then I started working towards that. So I know that for me that's always been a powerful motivator.
Definitely. And we also have a Joshua Moreno Design in the chat, and this guy, I met him at an art fair, and I wanted to have him on because he totally embodied that con spirit. But I ended up meeting him during an art fair around con time, so I roped him in to do one of these. But I mentioned him because he's one of those creator types who keeps moving. Right. And I'll be talking more about that aspect of things with him later. And, I've been looking at like the branding, sales, marketing kind of sides of things for a little while now. Mm. I found this guy, Grant Cardone, in the midst of while I was thinking about quality versus quantity, and trying to work in that matrix of, where if you have low quality, low quantity, you just suck. But, if you have high quantity and low quality, then you're, kind of a Walmart. But if you have high quality, low quantity, you're kind of a boutique, right? And then you start striving to get into that upper quadrant where you've got the high quality and the high content. I mean, high quantity and quality and quality and quantity. See, I'm all messed up now. But getting into that higher upper quadrant where you start tapping into like, the Apple computers, the electronic arts, where you're just making a lot of stuff and it's relatively high quality. And a Disney. You know what I mean? You're getting into those echelons.
Mm-hmm.
So the quote that he said that kind of blew my mind. Somebody was talking with him. Well, I'm trying to make something better, and I don't want to just keep putting out crap. And he was like, "Yeah, of course, everybody wants something better, but you will never get to quality without striving for quantity."
Right.
And that kind of like stopped me, where I was like, "Huh, okay." So it kind of gave me the permission to let myself indulge in, hey, let me do 50 versions of this thing and, only keep around a couple. Let me keep iterating and not worry about, the fact that people see me creating 75 of these things and they're just like, dude's just creating crap. I don't know what he's doing. That used to be a problem for me when people would see a lot of my creations and, they're like, well, he's just making quantity. And I'm like, that's not really what I'm trying to do. But so, yeah, that switch has hit for me. You're not going to make it to quality without striving for quantity. And that's been one of my mantras for a while now. I mean, I knew, and the book is Art and Fear, by the way, if anybody's checking it out. Thanks for being with us, Jay Kingpin. We'll definitely get on. You guys got to come back for that discussion. I'm going to get some young guy game industry talk in here, find out what the youngins are up to, because I'm so far removed. I'm on somewhere else now. But yeah, the Art and Fear, that whole creating. And I'm glad that, I've had you on here, Jeff, somebody who's kept creating. I definitely want to be mindful of your time. I know we can go on forever, but yeah, I'm so appreciative of you. Just want to reiterate that, and glad you came through. Is there something that you want to, we got Yellen Jeff, we got, Hefe Hoon, I'll post up all the links, but is there anything else you want people to know or to think about in terms of their personal creativity and doing their thing?
I guess, just for me, it's just, just do it, right? The old Nike slogan, right? Because what I find is that I get caught up in the I'm already at the finish line, right? And I haven't necessarily put in the work to actually get there. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one thing that I've really have tried to work on, where it's like, and finding the joy in the process. I think that's also something for me that sometimes if it feels like it's work, then I'm probably not going to do it, but it's just about really finding the joy in the process, and then not getting caught up, because I'll start to visualize things, to the point where like I feel like I'm there and I actually haven't even put into work, so for me I have to. That's an impulse I have to always be very actively trying to suppress.
That's a great one, because that hits me too, where I'm like, well, I've thought about everything, written the design document. Why actually do it? I don't need to. I'm good.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. Man, it has been awesome. It is so easy to talk with you. I had a couple notes, but I really didn't need to use them at all. And it flowed well, and the people seem to enjoy it here. So we'll definitely do this again. Maybe have you on next year, or if you got a new project going on, we can get you in for a little bit to talk about it at some other point around the year. But Jeff, it's been great. As always, loving the hat, love the style. Keep doing what you're doing, sir.
Well, B, thank you so much, man, and I appreciate you, like, as always, and I miss you, man, and can't wait to see you in person. This has been fun. And yeah, I'd love to come back on. Obviously, you mentioned, with Yellen Jeff, I'm still trying to figure out how to, relaunch that. I'm trying to figure out some things, maybe move it away from just being exclusively about movie reviews, but I still haven't quite figured that out. Figuring out, like, what the visualization is going to be about that. Like, you and I had talked about, coming up with, like, your interpretation of my Yellen Jeff image. That's kind of part of that whole, planning for me at this point in time. So yeah, as soon as I'm ready to kind of relaunch that, I'd love to come back on and talk some more with you about that and just general stuff. So it'd be great. So yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no prep time. Just jump in, man. Start
Yeah,
doing
I know. You know
start
what
doing
I'm
some.
saying? We just mentioned it. You know. So there it is. I'm doing it again. So damn it.
Start doing some yelling Jeff IG live, man. Let the peoples know.
Right? No, but it's all good, man. I appreciate you, B, and thank you again for having me, and thanks everyone for joining in. Great questions.
Awesome. All right, man. Take care.
All right, well, enjoy BenjaCon. I look forward to seeing the rest of the attendees and the interviews. So keep it going.
Hey, Jehudi. Yep, we'll definitely get you back in here talking some noise
Hey,
rap,
that's right.
talking
All
some
right,
straight
all
ish.
right, bro. Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
Jeff.
Take care. All right.
Peace.
Peace.
All right. Cool. So that was Jeff, and he's still looking for the little button there to turn us off.
Okay.
Oh, that's all. It's always weird with Instagram Live now because you have to kind of stop and find the "Do you really want to exit" button. But yes, that's my great friend Jeff. That is one of the first individuals I ever met in my professional game development journey. I started at 3DO in the Bay Area, and he had already had several years in the game. So I learned a lot from him. Definitely got some great words in there. If you want to re-listen to this later, it's going to be on my IGTV tab. And at some point, I'll put these up on YouTube so they'll be more accessible and more open to a lot of people. Yeah, exactly, Fern. That button is totally elusive. And, you say goodbye, and then there's that awkward, well, I'm still packing my car up. I can't leave just yet. So we'll figure it out. We'll make something awesome happen. Stupid old man hands. Yes. And that's Hefe Hoon, everybody. Make sure you follow him. Follow along with Yellen Jeff. I'm going to be back tomorrow with my man Theo, Show versus Business. We're going to have a special Show versus Business where we're not talking about our usual Wednesday discussions. We'll actually do more of an interview discussion about the overall concept of the show, how we got started, some insights in the movie industry, the business side of things, how this whole yin-yang machine of creativity versus commerce keeps going. This is a thing that I didn't think I'd be doing, but I'm here now, so I'd like to know your comments. Let me know. Let's see, Fern's talking about pull all the clips of searching for the button. That'd be hilarious. That would be hilarious. We might have to do something like that. All right, and if I missed your comment here, I think I got pretty much most of them as I saw them going by. We'll definitely get back at them. Make sure you leave comments in the actual post, and we'll talk later. Thanks, everybody. BenjaCon 2021.